Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, September the 5th, 2024. I don't really know much about Germany, but it certainly has been in the news recently. So I thought I would look at what's going on in this country with particular reference to the recent state elections. So the reason why it's been getting so much news coverage is because this party, the AfD, has done very well in state elections in Saxony and Thuringia. And people are very concerned about this because AfD is a right-wing party. And some are saying, this is the first time that a right-wing party has won an election in Germany, or a far right-wing party has won an election in Germany since the time of Hitler. So, people are concerned about it. And I thought that I would look at some relevant charts. The AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, I think that's what it stands for. It's got a chart, I think. I think it was founded, in 2013, or was it 2014? I've got the chart up, which I will be looking at, and some of the personalities there, the leader of the AfD, Alice Weidel. But it's not just the AfD, there's another party, the Sahra Wagenknecht, which has done well, which is this left-wing party, which has come from nowhere. So I thought I would look at that as well. And I want to just get some kind of context on it by looking at some of the horoscopes of Germany to get some idea about how this all fits together, and perhaps how the sign Aquarius is relevant to this all. Because I think the Aquarius is an important sign in terms of Germany and some of the people involved in Germany, and also in terms of Germany's past. And Aquarius is in general an important sign because we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 in Aquarius, right at the beginning of Aquarius. Pluto has been in Aquarius for some time. Yeah, sure, Pluto has just gone out of Aquarius, but it does return November the 19th. It will be back in Aquarius, and maybe this is all relevant. But I must warn you, as I said, I don't know a great deal about Germany. I don't speak German. I don't know much about German politics. I don't know really anything about German politics. So if you're from Germany or you know about Germany, don't expect any sort of superior knowledge from me. In fact, you probably know more about it than me. But if I stick to the charts, maybe I'll be okay. And anyway, I felt that I did have to cover this because it has been in the news so much recently. Okay, so let me now look at the astrology for today. And, just a reminder that, if you are not subscribed to this channel, I would really appreciate it if you were to subscribe, because it does make a big difference. And if you happen to like this video, I would really appreciate it if you were to like this video. Right, so let's now turn to the charts. So let's look at the astrology for today, which is Thursday, September the 5th, 2024. Now, in terms of the thumbnail is concerned, that's a picture of Olaf Scholz, and also we've got Alice Weidel, who is head of the AfD, or at least co-head of the AfD. She's the one that seems to get all the attention. There is someone else who is also in charge of the party, and then there is Sahra Wagenknecht, who is the head of this new left-wing party. So as far as today is concerned, the moon is still in Libra, and with the moon in Libra, I suppose it's kind of more of the same. It's about being quite cerebral about things, using perhaps our head rather than our heart, not wanting to get too closely involved in what's going on at an emotional level, but perhaps we can't really help it because Mars is in Cancer. Mars has now really starting to establish itself in Cancer. It's in the first degree of Cancer, and with Mars in Cancer, it is a big difference. We just have had Mars in Gemini, so when Mars moves from Gemini to Cancer, we can find that there is more emphasis perhaps on the emotional side of things, and we might become more defensive, or at least if we don't become more defensive, other people might. There are things that need to be protected, and we might put a lot of effort into protecting our particular patch of dirt, and that patch of dirt needn't be anything physical. It can be about our ideas, what we stand for, and if anyone gets too close, we can get really annoyed, and we can start getting angry. But we're trying hard to maintain some semblance of order and civilization. After all, the moon is in Libra, and that's what moon in Libra likes to do. Moon in Libra generally wants to keep the peace and perhaps talk things through, maybe negotiate even. And this moon in Libra, it does make a conjunction to Venus. So you can see that moon-Venus conjunction, that is generally speaking quite a nice conjunction. Venus is in its own sign in Libra, and the moon makes a conjunction to Venus. So in terms of getting on with people, it should be relatively easy, provided that we don't get into things too deeply. Ideally, we'll get on with people on a surface level. It's all about pleasantries, saying the right thing, not doing anything to rock the boat. Though there is the presence of true black moon Lilith. You can see that true black moon Lilith is kind of on the moon-Venus midpoint. And perhaps what that means is that we try our hardest to get on with people, and to an extent we're very successful, and certainly on the surface things are going well. But with true black moon Lilith around in the background, there may be a lot of things that are unspoken that are quite intense, quite powerful. People having hidden feelings which they're trying their hardest not to reveal. And some of those hidden feelings might not be very nice. So that is certainly a possibility. Also, we've got South Node in Libra. So we have had this conjunction between moon, true black moon Lilith, Venus, South Node. It's kind of nice that the moon is in Libra, but with the South Node, we don't want to take the principle of Libra too far. There's some danger, I think, that we try too hard to be accommodating. We might want to be nice. We don't want to deal with arguments. We don't want to bring things to the surface. But you know what? Some things do have to be brought to the surface. Otherwise they just fester and they rot, and they can become pretty unpleasant. And so it may be that an argument now or a disagreement now is going to be manageable, but if we were to leave it for a few months and just let it fester, then it could really be very, very unpleasant. So we do have to be careful about being too nice. Sometimes it's best to just say it as it is, and not to be afraid of having an argument. So that is actually the main thing going on today. There aren't very many major aspects today. It's really moon conjunct Venus. We've had a lot of action recently, but now there seems to be nothing much left. Though that's not to say it's going to be an uninteresting day. I mean, in terms of midpoints, the Sun is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Looks like a square. So there's Mars and Uranus. You can see that the midpoint between Mars and Uranus is going to be in the middle of Gemini. And in fact, the Sun is square that Mars-Uranus midpoint. So with the Sun square Mars-Uranus midpoint, I suppose there could be some excitement, and it's actually quite a dangerous aspect. It can be about accidents, being too hasty, getting into things without really thinking through the consequences. And machinery and technology do have to be treated with respect. If we use machinery that we don't really understand, then something could go wrong. But it's quite a minor thing, this midpoint, Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I think that most of us are not really going to be affected by it. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, so here we are. This puts the Sun at the center of the solar system, and just a reminder that the Earth is now really close to Saturn. It's just 2 degrees apart. So I think we're starting to feel it now. I think we're starting to feel that something is bearing in on us, and perhaps we can't express ourselves quite as well as we might like. Something is holding us back, but a bit of discretion may not be such a bad idea, because Venus is now making a trine to Saturn. So Venus, this is a heliocentric aspect. Venus in Scorpio trine Saturn in Pisces. So Venus in Scorpio trine Saturn in Pisces could be about having to be quite disciplined in the way we deal with other people. Relationships have to be managed. We can't just relate to people however we feel like. We have to perhaps do some planning and consider what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. But on the plus side, certain relationships can be stabilized. So if recently there have been issues with another person, then stabilization is possible. And Venus trine Saturn can just be about discipline in terms of perhaps how we spend money, and also what kind of things we might be attracted to. Venus is the planet of beauty, and a certain amount of I don't know, I suppose it's quite conservative in a way, isn't it? Venus trine Saturn is not really going to like things that are too dramatic. A bit of caution, a bit of reserve in terms of what we go for. Remembering that Venus can be about clothes and what we wear, and so maybe we're not going to be too dramatic, and we're going to, in terms of how we present ourselves, and maybe something quite understated about Venus trine Saturn. Another aspect happening is Mercury is conjunct Uranus heliocentrically. So remember, Mercury moves quite quickly. So even though it's not exact at noon New York time, we still very much have a Mercury-Uranus conjunction. So Mercury-Uranus conjunction does actually create a little bit of excitement. And also Mercury isn't too far from the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So remember that geocentrically we have Sun square Mars-Uranus. Heliocentrically, we've got Mercury really very close to the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and it may be about how we communicate and what we say. And so it provides a different picture. We saw in a geocentric chart the moon in Libra. It looks sort of quite nice and trying to keep the balance. But Mercury conjunct Uranus may be a rather different energy, wants to create a few upsets and wants to say things that might be unexpected and that perhaps that people don't want to hear. But if you're prepared to think it through, ask yourself, is it right to say something that might be outrageous? Maybe it is. Sometimes people have to sit up and listen. And I suppose that going back to the geocentric picture. There may be things under the surface. Remember, I was talking about the influence of true black moon Lilith being sort of close to Venus. There may be things festering below the surface which do have to be addressed. And perhaps with Mercury conjunct Uranus, that allows us to do it. We're able to talk about the things that no one else wants to discuss. And that could be something that we have to do. And we could be doing everyone a service. So that's the heliocentric picture. And I now want to look at things from the perspective of the 12 signs. Now, I should say that astrologically, there isn't really much going on today. I mean, certainly geocentrically, all we've got is that moon conjunct Venus in Cancer. So it may be, as I go through the 12 signs, that I have less to say than usual. Maybe. Maybe not. It's always difficult to predict how long I'm going to go on for. Okay, so let's look at the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, September the 5th, 2024. Okay, there it is. Okay, here are my forecasts for the 12 signs. Aries. Aries, you do understand that you're not alone. And you may feel that on your own, there is not a great deal you can do. I mean, you can try, and indeed there may be things that you feel that you should be giving some attention to, but it may just be really difficult when you're on your own to get much done. And that might bother you, and you don't want to have to ask anyone for help, but it may be necessary, or asking someone for advice. It's just not really what you want to do. But today you might feel that you have no choice. Either that or you do nothing. I mean, I don't think you should do nothing. I think that you have to perhaps make an effort to understand what is going through people's minds. That actually could be important. Because things may actually be more complicated than they seem to be on the surface. And that is a reminder that you've got this conjunction in Libra. Libra, remember, is your opposite sign, between the moon and Venus and black moon Lilith. And if you actually look at people and you try to understand them, you may eventually realize that they're holding something back and they're not being entirely honest about their feelings. I mean, it's not that they're being deliberately dishonest, but they don't want to tell you everything. And so maybe your job is somehow to tease out the truth. Maybe the truth is there. Maybe the truth is available if you're prepared to really look for it. And also, you can't really understand people. You can't even relate to people unless you understand their dark side, the side to them which isn't very nice. And again, I think that is really emphasized today with this conjunction between Moon, Venus, and Black Moon Lilith. But the South Node is also there. And so although the other people's influence is really can be quite strong today, still the North Node is in Aries. And with the North Node in Aries, I think that there is an ultimate obligation upon you to be in control, to be the one taking the initiative. And I know that's hard because you just might not feel that you have the resources to do that. And perhaps you need to give yourself a distraction. That might be important. A different thing going on, of course, is Mars moving through Cancer. It's now very clear that Mars has changed sign. Mars is, in the first degree of Cancer. And perhaps you're starting to feel the change. You're feeling that you are present in the world. And because Mars is on the solstice point. So with Mars on the solstice point, you are present. You understand that you can have an influence, maybe not today, but that you have definitely got something to contribute. And what you might have to contribute is something perhaps of an artistic nature. Might not feel like that to begin with, but Mars in Cancer is quite imaginative. Cancer is an imaginative sign. It can see things in all sorts of ways, and there's a lot of powerful imagery connected with the sign Cancer. And so perhaps you can bring some of this imagery down to earth and perhaps even explain it and talk about it and present it to a wider audience with passion and conviction. And even if other people aren't interested, if you throw yourself into some creative pursuit, with everything you've got, then I think that you could actually create something really quite amazing. And it's perhaps about bringing down to earth the power of your imagination and sort of forging it. You can have an idea and it's sort of very theoretical, it's all in the pie in the sky, but you have a chance here to turn it into something that's real, to just make it happen. And it might literally be an object that you're able to create, or it could be a concept that you can talk about to other people. So don't be afraid of trying to bring something down to earth, and that would be a very good and productive way of using your Mars. And of course Mars is now in Cancer and it does need to be used. If you're not doing anything, though, if you just spend a day doing nothing, then that Mars in Cancer could start to be disruptive. It could move you in directions that are not necessarily particularly healthy. So it does help. It would help if you really had something that you could really get your teeth into. And if it's of a creative or imaginative nature, then so much the better. As far as close relationships are concerned, I think that it can be a good day. I have to say that because the moon is conjunct Venus. So moon conjunct Venus is a classic aspect for relationships working. And so maybe you can benefit from it. In spite of all the issues, I think that you can find the right way of getting through to someone. I mean, you have to handle it correctly, and you have to accept that however nice someone is, they're always holding something back. And, deep down, they might not be as nice as they appear on the surface, but none of us are as nice as we appear on the surface. And so if you have an open mind and you're prepared to take people for what they are in all, in terms of all their complexities, the good sides, the bad side, and if you can address both, then I think that with that attitude, you can get some satisfaction in relationships, though it should always be on your terms. I think that is very important today. Taurus, you are perhaps feeling that things are not quite to your liking. You just feel that there might be obligations and that you can't do everything that you want to do. And so you could start the day in a somewhat negative frame of mind, thinking, oh, well, this is boring. But I think that approach would be wrong. Just because something seems boring doesn't mean actually that it need be boring. In fact, it could turn out to be very satisfying if you have the right attitude. And it's all about being prepared to start something and not being too phased if your initial attitude is quite negative. I mean, you're not really going to know what something is like, and you're not going to be able to evaluate something unless you first try it. And so Taurus, once you start doing something, and it might be, it might be really boring, but it's something you need to do. Once you start getting to work on it, I think that you will get a growing sense of satisfaction. And if you are involved in a repetitive task, as you might be today, it might seem boringly repetitive, but if you get involved in a repetitive task, this is going to actually allow some of your feelings to come to the surface. Because I think you do actually have quite powerful feelings at the moment, because Venus is relatively close to the true black moon Lilith, and you've also got a conjunction between the moon and Venus. And so your feelings will start to come to the surface, and when you actually start to consider your own feelings, you may be a little bit disturbed by them. Did you really feel that? And some of your feelings might seem a little bit negative, a little bit even destructive, and maybe feelings of jealousy and resentment as well. And perhaps that's a good thing. It's good that feelings come to the surface. It's good that you can actually start to understand, who you are and what you are about. And so, in that sense, there could be, a feeling of sort of self-awareness, I think. But don't try too hard to structure it. Feelings are not there to be structured. You must allow them to just develop and see where they go. And even if that means having to experience a certain amount of emotional chaos within limits. Of course, you can't have unlimited emotional chaos, but just letting things flow, letting things develop, and that might be actually an important process of self-understanding. So I think that in many respects today is quite introspective, and I think there is certainly work to do on yourself, and yes, to get a better understanding of who you are, and also, I suppose, what your limits are, and where the limits of your power are, because you do have a certain amount of power, but it's not power that's got no limits. Where, for example, is the area in your life where you have the most power? And perhaps that's something you need to seek. So if you do certain things, if you mix with certain people, you're in a position of weakness. But if you go to the right place, perhaps somewhere you feel comfortable with, perhaps somewhere you know the rules, then you'll find, Taurus, that you have really a massive amount of power at your disposal. So in that sense, choosing your battleground could actually be very important. Finally, there's a question of relationships. I've just mentioned the fact that the moon is conjunct Venus. I think with moon conjunct Venus in Libra, I think that with the right approach, your various relationships can work very well. And it's just important to allow a little bit of uncertainty. You can't understand people totally. You can't predict what they're going to do next. At least you can't do it 100%. You have to allow for some ambiguity, some uncertainty, and you have to not be surprised when someone does something you weren't expecting. And just because someone does something you weren't expecting doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Indeed, you might start to realize, perhaps for the first time, that another person really is very talented and they've got something to offer, but you have to listen to them. You must take the time to listen to them and put your own material and your ego to one side and listen to what another person has got to contribute. Because if you give them a chance, they might have something really very important to contribute. Gemini. It's nice that the moon is in Libra and Venus is in Libra, and with this sort of action in Libra, you may just feel that you can relax, that you can do your own thing in your own way, and that you don't really have to push yourself. I think that is okay, provided you're not lazy. I mean, I think there is a certain temptation, Gemini, today to be a little lazy. Perhaps you just don't feel that there's much pressure and that you don't actually have to do anything. But ideally, you should be trying to do something of lasting value and significance. And I think if you want to do that, you probably need to have the right attitude to your own feelings. What is it that drives your creativity? And if you try to limit your emotions, then you are probably limiting your creativity. And I think there is this issue, general issue with Gemini and creativity, that I think many Geminis actually do regard themselves as being very creative people, and they would like to be creative people. On the other hand, the very nature of being a Gemini can stop someone being creative. Remember, I'm a Gemini, so I feel I can say this. So, what actually does that mean? Geminis can discount the emotional side of things. They can discount the power of their own feelings. And of course, if you discount the power of your own feelings, and if you try to box in your emotions, then that can be creative death. It's like, I suppose, with writing. Many Geminis have fantasies about being writers. Maybe I'm projecting, but writing fiction, for example, I think that's something many Geminis like to do. Yet, in fact, Geminis can be very bad at writing fiction because they're hiding something. You cannot write fiction, or if you're not prepared to give anything away. So, if you parcel off your emotions and you hold back on some of your deeper experiences and your deeper feelings, and you think, well, no, I'm not going to tell the world about this, then in a way you're cheating. You're denying your audience what they really need to hear. And so that can impact, for example, Geminis, if they're trying to write a novel, for example. Yeah, they can come out with the words. You can come out with as many words as you like, but the words may be completely empty because certain feelings have just been denied to the reader. So, I mean, that's just an example of the fantasy about writing a book for Geminis. I mean, some Geminis can be very good writers and can be very powerful writers, but perhaps that's why so many good writers are actually Cancerians, not Geminis. And so if you want to be a truly creative Gemini, particularly today, you're going to have to engage your emotions, and you're going to have to engage the darker side of your emotions, and at the same time you're going to have to consider other people. You're going to have to consider the world out there. And if it's just something happening in your own way and you've totally cordoned off the world, then I don't think your creativity is not going to amount to much. On the other hand, if you are ready to reach out to people, to listen to people, get an idea about their feedback, and perhaps if you ask yourself, okay, this is something I'm good at, but what about the audience? So if you consider the audience, then that might be a big step in terms of being successful and being appreciated. And I'm not just talking about writing books or, I don't know, singing a song or anything like that. It's just about how the things that make you special can be appreciated and can be used in a constructive way. I mean, that is fundamentally what it's about. So that is a bit of a challenge, Gemini, and I don't think it's a challenge just for today. It's something I think for you to think about over the next couple of weeks. And I mean, continuing on the creative theme, it's not just about considering your feelings and considering other people's feelings. It's also about being persistent. Persistence really does matter as well. So if you decide you want to be creative in one direction, you've got to make sure that you continue in that direction and that you're not being distracted. But I don't think that should be a problem, because once Geminis get going, they do have today a great capacity for continued concentration and real focus in terms of getting your special qualities out into the open. Yeah, it does require work, but I'm fairly confident that you can do it and that you have got sufficient dedication. Cancer, you perhaps feel that you've got everything you need, and you may actually feel quite self-sufficient today. You've got everything around you. You probably don't feel you need to get any help or assistance, and indeed you might actually resent it if anyone offers help and assistance, because you're just comfortable where you are. And I suppose that may be fine, but I think if you were to just stay where you are and just not give much consideration to other people and what's going on out there, that might actually be a bit of a waste. And there's even some danger that you could be a little bit lazy, and you see an opportunity, but you're not really prepared to pursue it. I mean, why should you? I mean, if you're happy where you are, why would you want to move on to something else? And I absolutely understand that. But I suppose you just have to be just aware of where the pressures are and who is asking you to do things. So monitor your phone calls, monitor, text messages, see what people are saying. See if there's a call. By call, I mean someone asking you to do something, and it just comes from nowhere. Of course, it's someone you trust, someone who you know is not going to let you down, but you're asked to do something, or a suggestion comes your way, and it might require you to drop what you're doing and move from where you're comfortable to somewhere where you may be not quite so comfortable. And so be open to that challenge. But if that challenge doesn't manifest, then I think that is absolutely fine. Then perhaps you're justified in whatever you're doing, whatever your plans are, or indeed justified in whatever you're deciding not to do. So that would, that is one aspect of the day. Now, another reason why you might want to give yourself some variety is that if you were to decide to just stay in one place, and when I say stay in one place, I don't mean just stay in one geographical place, but in terms of staying in one conceptual space. If you stay in one place, your feelings might start bubbling up. Remembering that the moon is making a conjunction today to true black moon Lilith, and with this conjunction between the moon and true black moon Lilith, there is just a possibility that your feelings go in ways that you hadn't expected, and you might have quite negative feelings, and you might become quite pessimistic, and you might start digging over the bones of the past. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. And so it would really help if there were some distractions, something else to think about, something else to worry about. And so that might be why it might be a good idea to make some effort to get out, or some effort to interact with new people. Some kind of social stimulation could just prevent you from brooding. Yeah, a bit of brooding is harmless, but too much brooding, particularly if you're brooding over the past, or perhaps brooding over sort of injustices from the past, might not be such a good idea. Leo, you may feel the influence of the sun being where is it? The sun aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. That's right. The sun is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. In fact, the sun is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So the sun is your ruler, and so it has a big influence on you. And so with the sun aspecting your Mars-Uranus midpoint, you may feel that you want something to happen. You just feel that it has to happen, and you want to make it happen. And you might be quite impulsive, and your impulsivity could certainly be noticed, and it's always good to be noticed, but maybe it could be noticed for the wrong reasons. So, Leo, I would suggest that you are not in too much of a hurry. Yeah, I understand there are things you want to do, and you might have a sudden impulse that, you want to get something done, but that could be dangerous. And be especially careful with machinery. So if there's machinery that's lying around and you decide you want to use this machinery, maybe this machine or whatever it is has been sitting around for ages, maybe it could save you time, or maybe it could facilitate you destroying something. Maybe you have a desire to destroy something. Perhaps, I don't know, a blackberry bush. You might decide now's the time to destroy it. Or something else that is irritating you, but you just want to get rid of it. And you perhaps use some machinery to try to do it. Then things could go wrong. And I think the reason things could go wrong is not necessarily because there's anything wrong with the machinery, but you're in just too much of a hurry. You're not prepared to really sit and consider how perhaps this piece of machinery works and how to use it in a safe way. So I think that is certainly an area where you do have to be careful. And it may also be about how you come over in terms of how you talk to people, how you address people. And there's something about you that's just a little bit abrupt with the sun aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. But that shouldn't take away from the fact that from a communication perspective, I think when you want to, you can actually communicate very well. I mean, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Venus in Libra. And with this conjunction between the Moon and Venus in Libra, if you want, you can come over as being a very pleasant person, particularly for short periods of time. I think if someone has a 5-minute conversation with you, you can come over as a pleasant person. If they have a 1-hour conversation with you, it might be a different story, because sometime in that 1 hour, the Sun square the Mars-Uranus midpoint might decide to manifest. And if you are having conversations, consider what you're talking about. Yes, it is nice that the Moon is conjunct Venus, but the Moon is also conjunct true Black Moon Lilith. And so conversations could take an interesting turn, and you might find yourself, for example, talking about things that are unpleasant. And I suppose on a positive note, it may be easier than usual to talk about your own private material. Now, there's a place for that, talking about things that are really important to you, quite deep, the past, and subjects that normally you just can't discuss. But now you actually can discuss it. And so it's therefore going to be important that you choose your company carefully. I mean, you don't want to discuss private issues with anyone. You want to choose someone who you trust, or maybe who you don't know. I mean, that's always a good way, isn't it? I mean, if you've got something that's really bothering you and you really want to talk about it, then a good person to talk about it might be, I don't know, a stranger you meet on a train, because you know for sure you're never going to see that person again. So that might be a way of doing it. Though I suppose, because now with computers, you've got, what is it, Chat, GP, whatever. You can talk to the chat bot, and is it the Chat GPT, whatever. You can talk about your problems and your deeper material to your computer, and it will be completely impersonal. I mean, maybe actually quite a good exercise to do, because there are things that do need to be brought up into the open, but the situation is important. If you tell people private details and they know you a bit, then that could get you into trouble. So choose your moment and choose the other person very carefully. But if you get it right, I mean, I suppose if you're in therapy and you go and see your therapist today, I think you might have a really good time with your therapist, because you and your therapist are going to be able to discuss some really important things. I suppose it's you supposed to be doing all the discussing. So there is a lot of material on the surface, below the surface, which I think at some stage does need to be discussed. But, you know, if in doubt, you do need to keep it to yourself, because there is scope, I think, for, you know, some level of embarrassment there. And I should also point out, Leo, that Mercury is starting to make a square with Uranus. And you could say that, you know, Mercury is getting ready to leave Leo and move into Virgo. And that aspect with Mercury and Uranus is not exact today, but it will be exact tomorrow or the day after. You're already starting to feel its influence. And so before Mercury leaves Leo, you know, this is the last planet in Leo. Before it leaves Leo, make sure that you sort of make the most of the situation. You know, you haven't got much longer before Mercury moves into Virgo. And so with Mercury, when Mercury makes squares Uranus, that should be a time, Leo, for inspiration and having an idea which you can actually put into practice, that you can actually make real. And so try to be inspired, and try to expose yourself to sort of new knowledge, people with different ideas, because somewhere along the line you may come across something that is really, really inspiring and might be particularly important in terms of how you articulate your ambitions, because your ambitions are important. You know, particularly with Mercury square Uranus. You know, Uranus is in Taurus. It's still in Taurus. Doesn't move into Gemini for some time. So while Mercury is still in, while Uranus is still in Taurus, you know, you want to take advantage of it. Uranus in Taurus is about having new ideas, new ambitions, reimagining your own future. And so with Mercury square Uranus over the next couple of days, you may get a clear sense of what you're supposed to be doing. And it starts off with inspiration. It just hits you like a thunderclap, and then you'll know that you have to put theory into practice. Virgo, you may feel that material matters have to be dealt with. That's possible. The issue of money and spending money may also matter, and you know that can work in two ways. There may be a sense in which you are tempted to perhaps spend too much money. I think that is certainly possible. Something might attract you. It looks nice. You know, that's because the moon is conjunct Venus. You know, Venus is a planet of expenditure. It's a planet of beautiful things. And I know Virgos can be quite sensible, but it just may be something that you just get attracted to, and you feel you want to have it, and really you don't need to have it. It's actually not necessary for you to have it, but you might decide to spend money on it anyway. Or Moon conjunct Venus could be about spending money on entertainment or food, or particularly expensive food. And you might perhaps break your own rules. So in terms of money and spending money, consider what your rules actually are, and just make sure you stick to your own rules. And perhaps you need to have a plan. And if you find yourself having a burning desire to spend money on something you don't strictly need, then perhaps you just tell yourself, well, that's just Moon conjunct Venus. It needn't bother you. It shouldn't force you to have to do anything or spend anything. But there is another side to it. Moon conjunct Venus can actually be about making money and being fortunate with money. And it just might be a piece of good luck, or it just might be an opportunity to make money that just comes from nowhere, and it suddenly just comes together. And it may relate to something that you had done in the past. You'd perhaps had found a way of making money out of something from the past. You'd sort of forgotten it, but now you have another chance. So be on the lookout for financial opportunities, if that's relevant, if that is important to you. I mean, it may not be important to you. Aside from that, just a reminder that the Sun is getting very close to an opposition of Saturn. Okay, this opposition between the Sun and Saturn is not exact until the weekend. It's sort of 3 degrees away, just under. But still, this Sun-Saturn opposition is across the main axis of your chart. I think it's quite an important opposition. And you just might find that certain people, certain situations are weighing in on you, that you're not able to do what you want to do because you have to deal with other people's material. I'm not saying that you have to deal with other people's material, but I think when you're dealing with Virgos, it's quite easy to give Virgos a sense of obligation. It's perhaps easier to make Virgos feel guilty. Well, there's something they've got to do. And as a Virgo, you might think, oh, I've got to do this. I don't want to do this. Someone needs my help. I don't really want to give them my help, but I have to do it anyway. It's possible they don't need your help. You might feel nonetheless that you have to impose your help and your assistance and your time on another person. And that would, of course, be unsatisfactory. So if you do feel pressured today, and if you feel there's any obligation, particularly if that obligation is coming from another person, perhaps you need to analyze what is the nature of that obligation, and is it actually real? And perhaps the real obligation today is an obligation to yourself, because I think that today you are capable of hard work and discipline, particularly if it's something that relates to who you are and your creative abilities. You can focus on your creativity with, I think, great power and with great self-discipline. And so if you feel, for example, you're not good enough at something, or that something isn't perfect, or maybe you're creating something of an artistic nature and it's just not quite good enough, then now would be the time to give it that extra energy and give it that extra concentration. I think once you really get going on it, I think that you'll be able to really create something that is quite outstanding, and it may also have a certain beauty to it. And also what's happening is that Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, is starting to move towards a square of Uranus. And this square of Uranus Mercury-Uranus square becomes exact over the next couple of days. And it just might be a time when you do feel challenged but inspired. So something happens, you see something which is a threat, and it questions a lot of the things you stand for, but at the same time it is an opportunity. It's allowing you to see the world in a new way and to perhaps reconsider some of your aspirations. And at first it might not be anything you want to get involved with, but if you're tolerant to new ideas and new ways of doing things, I don't think in the end that you'll be sorry. Libra, there is a fair amount going on in your sign. The moon is in Libra, and the moon is making a conjunction to Venus in Libra, and also we've got the moon conjunct true black moon Lilith, which is in Libra. So you could say that it's all happening. So the question is it a good or a bad thing? I think that it probably is in many respects a good thing. It is nice for the moon to be in Libra, if you're a Libran, that is, because you feel comfortable. Moon is in your sign. The way you respond to the world it's you. You can do things on your terms, and that certainly makes you feel good. And matters are further improved by the fact that the moon is conjunct Venus. Venus is your ruler. Venus is in Libra. So I think that your ability to project yourself is going to be very good. In most social situations, I think that you'll come over extremely well, and I think that people are going to like you. So if you want to get close to people, now might be your chance. But there could be a problem, firstly because the moon is fairly close to the south node, Venus is fairly close to the south node, and you've also got, secondly, you've got the influence of true black moon Lilith. So there is a certain danger here on your part of complacency. You're going to be inclined to do things in the usual way, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And in terms of dealing with other people, you'll be focusing on the comfort. Everything is going to be fine. You may be inclined to just let things go. So if someone says something that you disagree with, it's going to be easiest to just let it pass. And that might be a mistake, particularly if they're saying something that is relevant. For example, what they're planning on doing. They're saying they're going to do something, and you just want to say fine, as we do, because it's easiest to say fine. It's not easiest to say it's not. It's not a good idea to say, oh, no, that's a really bad idea. Did you really think about this? You know how it is. You always, as a Libran, you don't want to rock the boat. But if you don't rock the boat, you run the risk of, in a way, being, I won't say evil, but there are different types of evil, aren't there? I seem to remember, it's a long time I've looked at the Kabbalah. When I was younger, I sort of had a phase of being into the Kabbalah and reading what Aleister Crowley said about the Kabbalah. And I seem to remember that in the Kabbalah there were these things called the clip-off. And the clip-off were like, I think that means, in Hebrew, means the shells. And the clip-off were like the dark side of things. And I seem to remember reading what Aleister Crowley was saying in his description of the Kabbalah. He had this book called 777. And he talked about the clip-off of Venus, or at least the clip-off of the part of a tree of life connected with that Sephira, connected with Venus. And he said that the clip-off of Venus is sort of the flip side of Venus, is the permitting of destruction. And that is a really interesting idea, because in terms of evil, we think of evil as being something active, as something we do, in a positive sense. But actually, evil can be about standing by and watch someone destroy themselves, or standing by and watch someone doing something really bad. It's not our responsibility. We're not going to get involved. But the very fact that we're conscious of something means that we are involved. And so I think there is a danger here that you allow something bad to happen because you want things to be harmonious. You want everyone to be happy. You don't want to cause any trouble. And it may be that one person is being unpleasant to another person. It may be someone is contemplating a course of action which everyone says, yeah, fine, you do it. I don't know. How it is on Facebook. Someone says, oh, I'm going to have a tattoo done. I'm going to have a tattoo on my head or whatever. And people say, fine, that's really nice. That's really nice. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do, and people just say, fine, fine, fine. You do it if that's what you want to do. And the challenge here, Libra, is perhaps to say, no, it's not fine. You're going to say why you think it's a bad idea. And in the process, you might get a lot of negative attention. You might be criticized. You might be accused of being mean or intolerant. But the point is, Libra, that you did your bit. And so don't take things for granted. Don't assume that what people say is fine. Don't just endorse what people are doing, are planning on doing. Because really, if you see that someone is doing, if you hear someone is going to do something bad or is planning on doing something bad, and you say nothing, or maybe you just put a smiley face, you're just endorsing it. And so I think having a moral compass, Libra, today is very important. And because you don't want to get into the flip side of Venus. You don't want to get into the dark side of Venus, which you might do with Venus conjunct true Black Moon Lilith. You want to be able to enjoy Venus as a positive energy and not get caught up in the laziness of Venus, and that the laziness of Venus, which can actually could lead to evil. So that is possible, but I know I'm being melodramatic there. I do understand that. I'm in a sort of everyday sense. Look, the moon is conjunct Venus. It's nice. You can have a nice day. You can project yourself as being a pleasant, attractive person, and you can enjoy yourself. But just make sure that if you come across something that you privately feel is not right, that you do something about it within the bounds of your own safety. So that's there is a sense there that you do have an obligation to speak up, perhaps, but it maybe the universe will leave you alone and won't force you to make those kind of decisions. And elsewhere, just a reminder that Mars is now at 0 degrees Cancer, very much in Cancer. Mars is in a high-profile part of your chart, and that Mars in Cancer is now encouraging you to really focus on your ambitions, whatever they might be. And ambitions aren't necessarily about career or work. People can have all sorts of ambitions, but do focus on your ambitions, because I think that you just feel that things are not quite as good as they should be, that things could be better. And I think that increasingly you are being challenged to make them better. Scorpio, it is a day when you probably feel that you need to really concentrate on yourself. I understand that there may be pressures from out there to do stuff, but I think that usually, certainly in most cases, that you can disregard these pressures. I mean, what matters is you, and you seem to have ideas about how you want to spend the day, and I'm not convinced that you're necessarily going to want to do anything particularly useful. There are a lot of things happening in Libra. We've got the Moon-Venus conjunction in Libra. Libra is the sign just before Scorpio. So it's a time when maybe you feel that you don't particularly want to be noticed. And it just may be that when you're left alone, you will be able to do your best work. Indeed, you may decide you don't want to do any work at all or do anything useful. And again, I think that is okay. I don't think that you should feel pressured in that direction. And as far as other people are concerned, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Venus. And Venus is ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign, so you would have thought with the Moon-Venus conjunction there is scope there for having an interaction with someone else. It might actually be quite an important interaction, but it's all very low profile. It might even be somewhat secretive. So if you want to do anything secretive today, then it now might be the time to do it. Now, it could be secretive in terms of you doing something on your own that you don't want anyone else to know about, or it could be about you and another person, perhaps a couple of people, other people. It may just be one other person doing something that can be kept secret, or having a conversation that you don't want anyone else to find out about. And if you're involved in secret negotiations, then I think that now would be a great time to be getting involved in that kind of thing, because I think that people will tend to honour their confidences. Though from an emotional perspective, the moon is conjunct true black moon Lilith, and so with the moon conjunct true black moon Lilith, there could be quite a lot of material coming up emotionally. Scorpio is of course a very emotional sign, but some of the things that you're thinking about and are experiencing in your unconscious world, perhaps in your dream world, and your general perceptions, you're just going to be aware that things are complicated, and the past is close. The past might be a long time ago, but right now the past feels very present, and that can be a good thing, provided that you're self-aware. But if you just brood about the past and you don't do anything with the past, and you sort of get angry about the past, then really that's not particularly useful. Now, if you happen to be in a high-profile situation today, if you're forced to move outside your comfort zone, if you're forced, I don't know, to do something relating to your ambitions or to work or business or however else you want to push your ego. I mean, because we're talking about ego, I'm not talking about ego in a derogatory sense. It's all about ego development, isn't it? What we're supposed to be doing. So if you do that kind of thing, be a little careful, because the sun is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and so there is some danger that if you try too hard to achieve an ambition, or you try too hard to make your presence felt, something could go wrong. Maybe you'll be too hasty, maybe you'll cause offence, maybe you'll just get involved in something that doesn't work. Computers, for example. So if you're reliant on computers for your work, for example, the computer may not behave. So make sure you've got a standby and don't plan, and don't get annoyed with machinery. I think that is a possibility. Machinery that is important to you and your ambitions, don't get angry with it. Be cool and calm about how you relate to it, and I think that might be the best way forward, because you don't want any disturbances, and I think that you kind of knew that already, and I think that is perhaps why you feel that you perhaps want a quiet day. You don't want to interact with things connected with your ambitions and the world out there, because you just know that it's potentially a recipe for disaster, or it could be a recipe for disaster if you start having to do things that you don't really want to do. Because I suppose that's also this question of psychological determinism, isn't it? If Scorpios do things they don't want to do, then at an unconscious level they just mess it up. I mean, I suppose we all do that regardless of our sign, but I think Scorpios may be particularly good at it because the unconscious world is so important to Scorpios. It's so close, and so that might be a very good reason for doing things your way. And if you don't want to do something, probably you shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't feel any great sense of obligation. Sagittarius, it's probably going to be a fairly easy day, all things being equal. At the beginning of this video, when I was talking about what's going on astrologically, I did say that there aren't really many aspects around, and perhaps you're really going to feel this. There's just not so much going on, and I think that you can perhaps enjoy other people's company. I think from a social point of view, with the moon conjunct Venus, I think that you're going to be quite effective. And I think that you can enjoy people's company, and there is, though, some danger that you enjoy people's company too much. I mean, you do have to think about yourself, and I suppose if you spend too much time with other people, then you might be wondering, where is your time going? And matters could be made more difficult if you start having to deal with other people's problems. That can happen. You can think you're having a 5-minute conversation with someone, and then an hour later, they're explaining something to you. They're producing paperwork. They're asking you to really understand why they perhaps are a victim of injustice, and you find that your own time is just going. So be a little disciplined when you're socializing, because you might find that, you have to deal with other people's material in a way that just goes on and on and on, and there's no time left. So, do be strict with yourself, and do be strict with other people, and, do consider your own material. I mean, what are you supposed to be doing? Where are you supposed to be putting your energy? Yes, you can enjoy yourself in a social setting, but perhaps what you're really supposed to be doing is considering your own individual contribution, because today you do have an individual contribution, and there is a huge amount of pressure to ignore your own individual contribution and to focus on other people's mess. And somehow you've got to resist that pressure and to really consider what it is that you are supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be putting your energy into. And all the while, the Sun is starting to make an opposition aspect to Saturn. Now, this opposition aspect to Saturn is exact over the weekend, but you're really starting to feel it now. And I think that it again gives us the idea of, how do you deal with pressure? Sun opposition Saturn is about you trying to go somewhere. There's a destination you have for yourself. It's very important in terms of your goals and your targets. You have this destination, but there's something stopping you moving in this destination. It may be things that are just too familiar. And just over the next couple of days, things that you're very, very familiar with, and particularly people you're familiar with, should be handled with care. Because if you and other people are familiar with each other, you know each other's pressure points, you know about each other's weaknesses. And there are people out there who know you so well, they do understand your weaknesses, and maybe they can use these weaknesses. And you might find that there's something you want to give it everything you've got, but you can't because of pressure from people who know you too well. And so, Sagittarius, it is very important today that you stand up for yourself, and that you identify your core interests, and you make sure that you protect those core interests, with everything you've got. Now, that doesn't mean to say you have to ignore other people. You don't. But you just have to make sure that you understand your priorities. And I think that the main priority today is you. Capricorn, you are feeling, I think, a sense of who you are and what you want to do. And I think actually you may have a quiet optimism that actually you are moving in the right direction, and that you're getting enough support. And so your overall approach is relatively relaxed, I think, because you know you've got it all right. You know you're going in the right direction. You know you've sorted it out. And so that just may be the way the day progresses. And on your journey, you're going to be quite good at explaining yourself and giving a good account of who you are and what you want to achieve. And I do think that in most cases people are going to listen to you. But it's important that you don't do things just because they make people happy. I mean, I think there is a certain temptation there, to sort of feel that it's all about keeping the balance. Moon conjunct Venus. It's all about people living in harmony, people working in harmony. If that's enough. That may not be enough, actually, because there is some danger, Capricorn, that someone is papering over the cracks. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that I think it is a good day, but someone's papering over the cracks, or is starting to paper over the cracks. And I think this is especially the case from a perspective of career and business. Someone is just saying everything is fine when it's not fine, or at least when it is about to not be fine. So, Capricorn, if you think that someone is being overly optimistic, then I think you do need to say something. You're not going to want to say something, but by saying something now, at an early stage, you won't actually get the negative reaction you were expecting. You might just get reaction that says, oh, I didn't know that, I hadn't seen that, oh, thanks for pointing that out. So it's okay to be critical today. In fact, it'll make you feel good being critical, because I think if you're critical in a constructive way, I think actually in the end you'll get good feedback, and you'll be saving other people and perhaps yourself as well a lot of aggravation at a later stage. But overall, you do just come over in a harmonious way, and it's perhaps because you come over in a fairly harmonious way, and people are not going to regard you as being a threat. It's because of that actually you can be constructively critical, that you can point out potential mistakes, you can tell people what they're about to do wrong, but you'll be able to use the right words. And I think that that's going to really give you a boost, and it will allow you to improve your reputation. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, the moon is conjunct Venus. So moon conjunct Venus overall is pretty good for getting on with people, particularly getting on with new people, particularly when there is some kind of shared agenda. If you and someone else are trying to go in the same direction and you understand each other's ambitions and aims, then there can be a great sense of oneness and harmony and cooperation. And as I've already said, that sense of harmony and cooperation could be so strong that you're actually allowed to be a little bit critical. On the other hand, Mars is moving into Cancer. Mars is now in Cancer, and that gives us a different picture. It could be about rivalry. Now, Mars is only just moved into Cancer, and it stays in Cancer until April of next year. But as Mars moves through the first degree of Cancer, as it is doing today, it may start to occur to you that you and someone else are potentially going to be rivals, or there is a conflict of interest. I don't think it's necessarily an issue today, but it could become an issue quite soon. And so maybe, Capricorn, that's something that you do need to prepare for. Aquarius. Aquarius, don't get too caught up in other people's ideas. Other people do have ideas, but that doesn't mean to say that you should take them seriously. And I don't think you should take anything that anyone says too seriously. And you certainly shouldn't be offended by what people say. People might say things that you do find in the first instance a little bit offensive, and you're wondering why they said it, and someone's opinions might seem to be just an indictment on who they are, and I think that would be incorrect. Don't get caught up in that. Instead, try to make it try to make things simple, rather than think about ideas and what ideas other people might have. Try to focus instead on perhaps individual issues, and don't make these individual issues more important than they actually are. Though it is true that you are looking for ideas, and I don't think you should be trying to make up your mind today, but you want people with ideas. You're attracted to people with ideas, and it's just important not to take their ideas too seriously. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. I mean, it is good to look for people who are inspired, who have a new view of the world, but you don't necessarily want to get obsessed with what actually those ideas are, what exactly that view of the world is. I think it's more about just appreciating the importance of being broad-minded and being able to look at things in several different ways. So that's something you might want to consider. And also, where there's an idea, there's an argument. Where there's an idea, where there's one idea, there's going to be another idea, because one idea always breeds its opposite. And where you've got two opposite ideas, that's, I suppose, the recipe for sort of outright war in the end. And matters are not helped by the fact that the Sun is moving to an opposition of Saturn. And this aspect between the Sun and Saturn is exact over the weekend. And this Sun opposition Saturn could have an impact on relationships. I think you're starting to feel this aspect already. And Saturn is you, Saturn in Pisces. Well, I know you're not a Pisces, but the ruler of Aquarius is Saturn in Pisces. And opposition Saturn is the Sun, which is ruler of Leo, your opposite sign. So Sun opposition Saturn does indicate the possibility of a conflict, a realization that you and someone else do not get on, or perhaps you have very different views of the world. Now, as I said right at the beginning of this piece, you should not get too caught up with individual views of the world or individual political opinions. That should not be the basis for agreement or disagreement. You shouldn't choose your friends on the basis of them believing the same thing as you. But with the Sun opposition Saturn, I think you are starting to be aware that some people are very different from yourself, and you then have to consider, how are you going to deal with it? So that's a broad picture today. So as you can see, it is a little bit confusing. I don't think we necessarily get one big theme for the day, but it's just a question of just being aware of the possibilities of conflict and not getting too caught up on one way of looking at the world, because if you start to dig your heels in, you get really entrenched with one approach or one idea, then you're asking for the opposite. In other words, you're asking for an argument, you're asking to fall out with people, and I don't think that's what you want to do. And yeah, with this Sun opposition Saturn, start to consider how you might fall out with someone. So if there's someone that's important to you, but you're aware that you do have some differences, consider how those differences could get stronger. And it may be that you can take action to prevent some kind of relationship breakdown. And it may just simply be staying out of someone's way for a couple of days until this Sun opposition Saturn has passed. Pisces. Pisces, it's maybe not a particularly interesting day. We do have a lot of planets in Libra, and from your perspective, Libra is a somewhat troublesome sign because it's perhaps a little introspective, and you're spending time thinking about things that you'd perhaps prefer not to be thinking about. And for example, we have the moon conjunct true black moon Lilith in Libra. True black moon Lilith can be about things that are perhaps very deep and entrenched. And as a Pisces, you understand that you live in a complicated world, that you understand that things really are entrenched perhaps. You understand that, and you understand that not everyone is pleasant, and you're perhaps giving this a lot of thought, and really it's too much thought, but perhaps it's a good thing, to be able to understand what motivates people, what motivates you, the influence of the past. This can all be very important to you. Again, it's not something that you want to get involved with, but you might get involved with it anyway. Now, because of this, you might then feel that really you don't want to be in the world. You perhaps prefer to do everything sort of behind closed doors. But actually, Pisces, this moon conjunct the black moon Lilith and the moon conjunct Venus will make you strangely charismatic. I mean, you may not be planning on being charismatic, but I think that people are going to find you interesting. You'll give the impression that you've really got something to offer, that you've got your surface appearances, but underneath the surface there is something else. There is a complicated but very interesting person. And I think that is the impression you can give. And I think that is something very much to be welcomed. Also, Pisces, you're going to be able to, if you want, accomplish some amazing things without ever making a big fuss about it. So, if you have strong desires, if you want something to happen like right now, then you can make it happen right now. But you can make it happen right now in such a way that kind of no one notices what's going on. And maybe that's because you're a Pisces. Pisceans can sort of do things in a sort of gradual, indirect kind of way, and no one quite knows what Pisces is up to, but it's all happening under the surface, and then all of a sudden things have changed, and things have changed very dramatically. And so that's a kind of change that you can really bring about. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I've already said that I think you are charismatic. There's something about you that is quite intense and interesting, but relationships could nonetheless be an issue because you've got the growing influence of a Sun-Saturn opposition. So the Sun and Saturn are opposition each other. They're less than 3 degrees apart. This opposition is going to be exact over the weekend. So it's there. You're starting to manifest it. And I think, Pisces, you are going to be aware of other people's influence on you, and you're also going to be aware of your influence on other people. And in certain situations, there might be a little bit of a power struggle. You know, who is in control? Who wants to be in control? And that could be quite disruptive. So, Pisces, really do consider not just what impact other people are having on you, but what impact you're having on other people. Yes, you can be charismatic and attractive and intense, but certain people might just find you to be too much. That is possible. And so there may be times during a day, or not just today, but over the next couple of days, where you have to just tone things down a little. Certainly today and tomorrow, perhaps just turn down the volume just a bit, and that just might make things easier, and I think it would make you more approachable. Maybe you don't want to be approachable. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 4, youthful folly. Now, when you get youthful folly in the I Ching, it may indicate that you shouldn't be asking the question. Perhaps you know the answer, or you've been told the answer. And so why are you wasting the I Ching's time? So if you're in a situation where you've asked a question before, so perhaps your main concern as you're listening to me is something you've already asked another oracle. Maybe you've asked the I Ching before. Maybe you've asked the tarot cards, whatever. So if you're dealing with an issue that you've already considered, then getting another opinion is not necessarily going to help. I mean, that is one view. And it just may be that with youthful folly, you shouldn't be watching me. I mean, maybe I should have, when I saw youthful folly, just have said, no, I'm not going to do an I Ching today. Maybe that's what I should have done. But anyway, I'm proceeding with youthful folly. And with youthful folly, it is about the mistakes. It's about the mistakes of youth. And of course, youth means the mistakes of starting something at the beginning. It needn't be about being youthful. It can be about being inexperienced. And so there's a lot that can be got wrong here. And we actually have 4 moving lines. That is a lot of moving lines. So with these I Chings, if there are 4 moving lines, that suggests quite a busy day, quite an active day, regardless of what the I Ching actually is. Things moving from one place to another, things in a permanent state of transition. And looking at the first moving line is right at the bottom. So that's about someone being foolish right at the beginning of an enterprise. And yeah, I'm afraid that might be you. Perhaps you've just started something and maybe you just don't know what you're doing. That is possible. And I'm talking to myself as well here. I suppose in a way this I Ching reading is for me as well as you, because I suppose I'm watching this video. So it's not just you I'm accusing, or not accusing, but suggesting there might be something foolhardy about your approach. I'm actually saying there might be something foolhardy about my approach. I'm possibly being foolhardy making this video in the first place. But at the beginning of something, you're excited about something, you want it to work, but it's maybe not working. And there are other moving lines, and the question is, how does one deal with foolishness? Maybe one is actually able to, somehow tolerate it, but also sort of moderate it. And there does come a point where we might feel that we've got over this burden. Things are starting to calm down. We may feel that we've made some mistakes, but we just carry on, and it may feel that some of the mistakes seem to sort themselves out, but we just carry on. And in the end, the top line moves, and the top line does indicate that things reach quite a serious stage. Someone is being really stupid. They're taking things too far, and it may not be us, it may not be someone else. It may be someone else. So if it may be you, it could be you going too far and doing something stupid. It could be someone else doing something really stupid. And it talks about punishing the fool. So if you see that someone else is being an idiot, you can't just stand by and let them be an idiot. You, in some way, have to punish them. I don't know what that means. That means withdrawing support or giving them serious criticism. But foolishness, in the end, can't be tolerated. And so, if it's our own foolishness, then we do have to be very firm with ourselves. Because if we don't punish ourselves, then something else is going to punish us. We can't continue with this behavior. But just a reminder, this is only for one day. Tomorrow is another day. Anyway, we have 4 moving lines, and that means that this hexagram does move. It does transition into something else, and it transitions into thunderbolts, which is hexagram number 15. So let me just put the numbers there, which I sort of forgot to do. So that is let me just make sure it's. I feel I should put the 15 in just as a matter of course. So that just said just thunderbolts. So thunderbolts does represent a sense of shock. There can be a sense of shock there, and so there it is. There is 15 thunderbolts. Wilhelm translation calls it the arousing. It's something happening, something unexpected happening. Perhaps we're doing something stupid, and then suddenly it seems that things go really wrong. Or maybe someone else is doing something stupid and something goes really wrong as a result of someone's carelessness. And it just comes from nowhere. It's just overwhelming. And it may feel that it is a situation that is completely disastrous. It is not completely disastrous. We're going to be able to keep our cool, and that's what we have to do. So our first instinct is to think, this is it, this is over, we have to run for the hills. But it's not that bad. If we can just maintain our composure, then it's going to be okay. So perhaps that's how we deal with folly. There has to be a mistake, and there has to be a sense of shock. And it's because of that shock that we can actually get over the situation. And so fate might actually provide a resolution to our folly, or perhaps a resolution to someone else's folly. So now I have a rather difficult task of looking at the astrology of Germany. As I said at the beginning, I don't know a great deal about Germany, yet it's getting a lot of coverage in the news. And so, where do we start? these elections, people are getting really upset about these election results, even though they are state elections. The AFD may have got the most votes, but it's still in certainly in Thuringia, it came second to the CDU in Saxony. But still, that doesn't mean they're going to form even the government at a state level. Certainly, we're not talking about them forming any government at a federal level. I believe these were state elections. So maybe there's a certain sense in which it's being over dramatized. So, in terms of a starting chart, perhaps to try to understand maybe what is happening, I think the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction chart in 2020 might be a good place to start. So here is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020, and I've relocated it to Berlin. So where are we in the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction cycle? Because we had the conjunction in December the 21st, 2020. That was the beginning of something new. And so a few weeks ago, we had a Jupiter-Saturn, was it on the 19th? We had the Jupiter-Saturn square. So the Jupiter-Saturn square is when the conjunction, the beginning of whatever started in 2020, we get a sort of a moment of crisis. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 was at 0 degrees Aquarius. And as you will see, this sign Aquarius does just keep cropping up. And so set for Berlin, well, we have Mars in Aries. And I suppose with Mars in Aries conjunct the midheaven, you sort of get the impression perhaps of a country going to war. And of course, just over a year after this, you had the invasion of Ukraine, which had a huge impact on Germany. And it had an impact on Germany because, for one thing, Germany started to pour money and weapons into Ukraine, and the government in Germany felt it had to do everything it could to support Ukraine. And that's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, it's mind-bogglingly weird because one of the enduring images of Nazism, if one thinks about Nazism and the Second World War, is the Nazis invading Russia and Operation Barbarossa invading the Soviet Union, and here it is. This government, this sort of left-wing government of socialists and Greens, supporting intervention into Russia, and Germans being excited about about tanks, German-made tanks moving through Kursk. Being excited about it, being excited about German-made weapons, the possibility of Taurus missiles hitting the Kerch Bridge in the Crimea, and yet these are the same people who are now very concerned about supposed Nazism or a return to Nazism in Germany. That somehow the AfD, this right-wing party, are associated with Nazism supposedly, and so that is kind of a bit weird to me when the German government is sort of, in terms of its foreign policy and in terms of Russia, it's behaving how the Nazis used to behave in a way, and getting excited about German tanks on Russian soil. And of course, as we know, the AfD is relatively sympathetic towards Russia. And of course, the Nazis in the early 40s were not sympathetic towards Russia. So that is a bit odd. But here is that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius. This is a new beginning, and it's about the government, Aquarius. It's also about rebellion. Government, Jupiter-Saturn conjunction Aquarius is about control, the government wanting active control over people's lives across the world, and it's also about rebellion. And I suppose with rebellion you could see that with the Mars conjunct Uranus right on the midheaven Mars in Aries conjunct the midheaven set for Berlin. So that is the backdrop, and then it's perhaps worth considering what was actually going on for Germany when we had these elections. So here we have the chart. Here we have the elections in the German elections. So September the 1st, 2024. So this is when it happened, and sorry, it's a bit early, but I've got 8 p.m. I think the polls actually opened at 8 o'clock in the morning, not 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's the election. I've set that for Erfurt, which I believe is the capital of Thuringia, where the AfD did particularly well. So if it is true that the polls opened at 8 in the morning, you can see that there's a sort of Mars-Jupiter conjunction on the midheaven. Potentially you've got Black Moon Lilith on the ascendant, opposition Neptune. And we've got Pluto absolutely on the brink. Pluto is about to go back into Capricorn. And with Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius, remember we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December 2020, which was at 0 degrees Aquarius. So Pluto is very close to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Okay, I know that Pluto is about to go retrograde. Well, it is now retrograde. Let me get that right. I know that Pluto is about to go back into Capricorn. It has been retrograde for some time, and now it's going to go back into Capricorn. But it will go into Aquarius again on November the 19th. And so that is a reminder of how important Aquarius really is. And Black Moon Lilith opposition Neptune, I suppose, talks about the fear that these elections have caused, that the right is on the march, and something dark is coming into being. And I suppose Black Moon Lilith is also trine Uranus, and that Pluto, which is now of course in Capricorn, does have an impact on certain German charts. So if we look at the German chart for unification, which I believe happened at noon on October 3rd, 1990, and I set that for Bonn. I think at the time, the capital for a time, it was still at Bonn. So if that chart is correct, then if the ascendant is correct, then you can see that the descendant is at 2831 Capricorn. So what's happening is that Pluto is moving on to Germany's descendant. So Pluto is perhaps bringing something to life, and it's all about fear. And I suppose it's about perhaps the past. North Node, German unification. North Node is in Aquarius, so that Aquarius is quite prominent there. That sign, even though you've got 28 Capricorn on a descendant. So you've got in that unification chart, it's those sort of unconscious enemies, isn't it? I mean, that's what the descendant is about, or it can be about. We have these fears, and we refuse to see these fears in terms of ourselves. We project it onto other people. So Germany, publicly, as a unified country, may say to itself, we have moved beyond the past. We have moved beyond Nazism and communism. That's all from the past. We can move on. But at an unconscious level, it's still there. The past is still there. And so Germany might want to project that past onto the AfD and say, oh, well, look, there are the Nazis. That's our past. Let's isolate them. Yet at the same time, you've got a German government that claims to be, progressive and green and socialist is sending tanks to Ukraine, which is, that's Nazi behavior as far as I'm concerned. That's what Nazis did. I mean, in terms of the early 1940s, German tanks on the Russian steppes, which is what we've got on Kursk. So there does seem to be quite a lot of, shall we say, projection there. Now, as far as the AfD is concerned, I believe the AfD is so it's a right-wing party. I think it was originally started because it wanted to leave the euro, and I think it increasingly wanted to leave the European Union. They're right-wing as opposed to supporting capitalism. They're not socialist, obviously. They're not communist, and they are not big fans of immigration, to put it mildly. And there's also accusations that some members of AfD have been anti-Semitic and are speaking favourably about Nazi Germany. So that's the AfD. But I think that, I suppose there are people in the AfD who have lots of different opinions, but they're just generally populist of the right. And there was a conference in which the AfD was formed. It was regarded as a starting conference, and it was on April the 14th, 2013. I've set this chart for Berlin, but I don't think it was in Berlin. I think it was probably somewhere else, but I don't know. I was in a bit of a hurry to set it up, but I don't have the precise time at which this conference happened, so I think I can just go with a noon time. It probably wasn't Berlin, but here's the AfD's chart, April the 14th, 2013, which was a Sunday, and you perhaps get an idea about it, the fact that it's got 5 planets in Aries. So if you've got a chart with 5 planets in Aries, you kind of get the impression of a lot of noise. Something does make a lot of noise. It's quite impulsive, and it was formed at the time of a sort of Uranus-Pluto square. You want to change things, and in a way, it's not a complicated chart. We don't see planets in sort of Cancer and Taurus here. It's really Gemini and Aries. And there's Moon-Jupiter conjunction. So Moon-Jupiter conjunction is probably a good time to form a party. It's good for making a lot of noise, getting a lot of attention. And it's interesting that they've just had this electoral success in Thuringia and Saxony, to a lesser extent, with Jupiter moving through Gemini. So it's kind of at the same time as their Jupiter return. And I do think this chart it's what it doesn't have, which is perhaps more important than what it does have. I think it's simple. I don't think there's necessarily anything complicated about its message. It's just Aries Gemini. That's what it is. It's a party of protest. It's protesting against things. It's impulsive. It perhaps doesn't care too much who it offends. Does this party have a secret agenda? I shouldn't think so. No, it's all very out in the open. I mean, at least that's perhaps how I would see it. I mean, this is a flat chart. I've said it with 0 degrees Aries on the ascendant because I just don't have the time of birth. So that's a chart, and I think that Jupiter moving through Gemini is certainly going to be has been useful for this chart. Now remember that next year Saturn moves into Aries and Neptune moves into Aries. Now with all of these planets in Aries, one wonders how the AFD is going to deal with Saturn crossing all those 5 planets, hitting those 5 planets over a period of a few years. Now, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, maybe Germany will feel it can somehow ban the AFD. I mean, that seems a bit unlikely. Or it may just be for some reason electorally they may not really fulfill all of their potential. So maybe with Saturn going about to go through Aries, if you're worried about the AFD, that might provide some solace. I mean, how are they going to manage? And then there is the leader of the AFD. I know they've got co-leaders. They've got 2 leaders, but the leader who seems to get most of the press is Alice Weidel. She's a former Goldman Sachs banker, I think, and she is in a same-sex relationship, and I think she has 2 adopted children. And so perhaps not quite of the stuff of which fascist dictators are made, maybe, but she's got 3 planets in Aquarius. She's got the sun in Aquarius. And so, again, the Aquarius theme is coming out. We had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius in 2020. She is in Aquarius, and so she's also got the moon in Gemini. So there's a lot of air here. When you think about Hitler's chart, for example, Hitler's chart is just Taurus. You think of the burning resentment of the sun in Taurus, the Venus-Mars conjunction in Taurus. You don't get that here. This is just very simple. It's just air. There's a lot of talk here, and I think that chimes also with the horoscope of the AFD. That the AFD has this Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. Alice Weidel has Moon in Gemini, and she's got these planets in Aquarius. So I don't know. I'm not really convinced that this is a chart of someone who represents a grave threat to democracy in Germany. And at the same time, we've got the other party that's been talked about a lot, and that is the Sahra Wagenknecht. So that is a sort of a left-wing party, but it's a very new left-wing party, and it's a left-wing party that wants to, as far as I understand it, wants to focus on workers' rights without distraction. And I think that Sahra Wagenknecht, when talking about other left-wing parties, she said they were too focused on diet, pronouns, and the perception of racism. So if I understand that rightly, she would be saying that all this transgender stuff and diversity is all a bit of a distraction from workers' rights. And as I understand it, Sahra Wagenknecht's party, as far as they're concerned, if someone immigrates to Germany, they should, behave properly. And I think that, as far as I understand it, they would support deporting immigrants who were not following Germany's rules. So there is, with her party, there's a skepticism about immigration and about its value. But that is very much a party of the left. And here is Sahra Wagenknecht's chart, and you can see the Gemini, Venus in Gemini, and she's got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Libra. And so Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Libra is about, I suppose, freedom and perhaps workers' rights. But Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is wanting to free yourself from things that are holding you back. And I think that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is sextile Mars. And so that does give her a lot of sort of power and energy. And she's a Cancerian. She's got the Sun in Cancer and Mercury in Cancer. So that does give some emotional depth to her. And there's a certain amount of tradition to certainly to Sahra Wagenknecht. And she's perhaps quite possessive of a tradition as she understands it. So maybe she represents a tradition in terms of the left, which she may feel has been lost. The whole sort of progressive woke left may conflict with her own values, and so that could be how the Sun and Mercury in Cancer are actually relating to one another. And then there's a question of, how is this affecting the current Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz? So here is Olaf Scholz's chart. And Olaf Scholz, we do have a time chart for Olaf Scholz. So Olaf Scholz has his IC at 2817 Capricorn. So what's happening is that Pluto has now gone back into Capricorn, and so Pluto is triggering his IC, so he is the Chancellor. So Pluto is certainly bothering him, I would say. And remembering that in a German unification chart, if you go back to the German unification chart, then 28 Capricorn is on the descendant. So you can see that Pluto going into Capricorn is impacting both the German unification chart and also Olaf Scholz's horoscope. And finally, I suppose we should end perhaps with the German unification chart. And next year, Saturn and Neptune go into Aries. Now, I've already suggested that this Saturn and Neptune going into Aries may represent some major issues for the AFD, because the AFD do have 5 planets in Aries, if you take April the 14th, 2013 as a start point for the party. But it's going to affect the German unification chart, because you're going to have Saturn and Neptune on Germany's midheaven next year, and I suppose the year after. It's about to happen. Furthermore, Germany has Venus on the IC, so there's Germany's Venus on the IC at 1 degree Libra. So Germany's kind of got its sort of Libra return. So that's strange, isn't it? You had the AFD's election successes at the time of Germany's Venus return, but having Saturn firstly Saturn and Neptune opposition Germany's Venus, then conjunct Germany's midheaven, and the Saturn in Aries is fallen, and that Sun is going to be really smashed when Saturn goes opposition Aries, sort of a year or two after that. So you can see that from a Saturn Neptune perspective, things are looking a bit difficult for Germany over the next few years, assuming we can take this chart as being the chart we can use. I mean, there are other charts for Germany. There's a chart that Germany became nominally not independent, but federal Germany, but was born in 1949. So I'm afraid I haven't got any great structure there. I'm just looking at some charts relating to the AFD, and Sahra Wagenknecht and to Germany in general. It's all a bit vague. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have been more sort of organised, but I just wanted to sort of give my first thoughts, and maybe I need to sort of bring these charts together and do some more thinking about what it what it means, all of this. And of course, when I talked about Aquarius, and underneath it all, I suppose what many Germans are afraid of, and I suppose not just Germans, but they're afraid of a return to Nazism. That seems to be what it's all about. I mean, the whole reason we have the European Union, and it's because people never wanted to go back to Nazism. That was what it was all about. Yet there's this constant fear that it might reappear. And of course, in terms of the horoscope of Nazi Germany, of course, Nazi Germany is an Aquarius. So this Aquarian theme comes up again. Aquarius, of course, reminder that Aquarius is essentially a totalitarian sign. And so it is cropping up. But where is it cropping up? And it just seems that the German establishment is just focusing on the AfD as a threat, as a possible remanifestation of Nazism, yet forgetting the fact that Germany has been sending equipment and tanks into Russia, which is is what many of us remember, what many of us associate Nazi Germany with, sending tanks to Russia, sending weaponry, and now you've got German tanks on the Russian steppes around Kursk. At Kursk, of course, there was that huge tank battle in 1943. So who is bringing the history back into life? It may not just be the AfD. It may be the current German government of sort of supposed Greens and socialists. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. Sorry I wasn't more coherent. And if you found this video of interest, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. It wasn't, I don't think, my greatest video, but if you did happen to like it, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you are not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.